Hello friends, I did a little tutorial the other day, actually a short, and I had a few of you ask me how I did it. So I thought I'd go ahead and create a tutorial for you. And you could use either of these brushes. This is a cat's tongue. That's mine from my subscription box, but I will share with you a link because I also have the Princeton one. And then this is just my little 10 filbert. It's in my subscription box. It's also in my custom brush set. And I will link the Princeton one for you down below as well. So the reason why I like this one is I love working in layers, starting out with a light glaze layer and building. And right now for fall, I just love these colors, these ruby reds and kind of like a grayish blue. I just love those. So that's what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to create a couple little flowers, and then I'll start off in those light layers, and then I'll go in with a few dark layers. Okay, so I've got, I think I'll start with, well, you know what? Let me just see. I'm not sure which one I'm going to use first. Let's see what I intuitively pick here. I am using my MeiLang palette, so I'm just going to give that. This is that Paul Rubens MeiLang palette, so many of us love. So I'll just give it a little spritz. They were dry and hard, so this just kind of activates them, softens them up. I've got my wash and my rinse water, real important. This is the MeiLang, you see me use this all the time, the MeiLang water palette. I love it. No chances there whatsoever of me spilling that, which I like. Okay, so what I think I'll do first is I kind of want to do this, as far as composition, kind of this almost like a bouquet, but it's a little bit like, I don't know, I refer to it like an explosion. I love that type of bouquet. So I'm going to put a flower here, and I just very loosely draw these out just so I have a little bit of an idea of placement. Another flower there, and then in between as I go, I will add in darker layers with maybe, you know, something like this with these fun little berries, some of these little berries, things like that. All right, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to start with this brush. And, you know, you really actually could even use the 8 brush. So maybe I'll use all 3, and you could see how I do that. I'll leave them all setting right there. So one of the reasons I love this brush, the filbert, if you guys like florals, like a filbert is your best friend. Same with the cat's tongue. They're just so wonderful. I mean, look at that filbert. It's already in a petal shape. And if you put it on its side, you get these really cool kind of thin petal strokes. These wider ones I did, you could see, kind of like that. So I just love these brushes. And of course, a round is just a staple foundation, right? So let's start here. And what I want to start with, by the way, you're going to see me dipping into my palette over here. Let me scoot my... So I've got this Paul Rubens palette, which is the same as this. I just used the tube version of those same colors and put them in this gorgeous big palette. Now, I know this big palette isn't going to be for everybody. This one specifically is for my desk because it is so big and heavy. You wouldn't want to carry it around. And then one of you saw me using this and said, why don't you put it on a Lazy Susan, which I loved because I can just spin it around to whatever colors I'm using. And it's so funny because I didn't really think to share any of the information about it with you, but so many of you are asking. So that is that. I love it. And unfortunately, I don't remember who talked about putting it on a Lazy Susan. Whoop. So see, you see how big it is? But what I love is it's got this huge mixing area. Let me just tilt my camera. See that? It's wonderful. I love that about it. So again, this just stays on my desk, and it's Meeden. I'll put my link down below that I bought it on Amazon, of course. Okay, so what I'm going to do first is just dampen my brush. So I'm dipping it in the clean water. I'm just lightly scraping it off. And I have sprayed these as well, so they're somewhat ready to go. And then I'm just going, I want to start with that light value, meaning this light value is about 80% water, 20% pigment. So if I was to go straight in here, and this is Payne's Gray, by the way. Yeah, so that is a dark value. That is like 80% pigment, 20% water. If I add a little bit of water to that, now I'm in the mid range, which actually that is a little bit more the lighter range. So, and this is why you do this, so that you can kind of see the different ranges. I try in my paintings to include at least 3 values. If I just dip my brush in water one more time, now I've got that light value. So working with the 3 different values, I'm going to start with that real light value. Once that's dry, I can go over this flower with the mid value. And then for my darkest areas, the 80% pigment, 20% water. This one's about 50-50. This one is just the opposite, 80% water, 20% pigment. So make sure you have a little, scratch sheet you can kind of practice that on. Just makes it a lot easier. I kind of can eyeball it now at this point. So I'm just going to put that in my palette here and tap, 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 because I want to get rid of some of that excess liquid. And I'm going to start up here. So I'll go in with my first petal in the middle. And actually, I wish I would have used that. So this one, I'm using my brush on its side. This is the filbert. And then I'm using it on its side, but I turn it just a bit clockwise. And now I've got my first petal, very light. So let me do that again. For some of the side petals, tap, tap, tap. And then I'm going to go in and add those side petals. So on its side, press down, and then maybe a little one there. So I've got this flower opening up, very easy. Tap, tap, tap. Here we go again. Press, open the belly, but it's on its side. A little bit more. And I'm going to go in right next to that. And this makes the perfect little teardrop petal shape. Isn't that great? Now, while that's wet, I might, let's move that out of the way, grab my 8 brush, because I don't want to completely clean my first brush. And let's go in, I'm going to grab a little bit of my olive green out of my palette. Tap, 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 and just, ooh, look at that. Isn't that fun? Just tap in there, and then I'm going to let that spread. Look at that. And just light pressure. I'm holding my brush so I only get the tip somewhat straight up and down. And just create a long stem. So there's our first little flower. Now I'm going to go in and maybe let's use like this brown color. It's like a burnt sienna. Oh, here, I'll turn my palette here so you can see that. I love, especially for fall, these orangey browns. I think they're so beautiful. And the golds. And we can do some leaves here, but I'm using that light value. So if you need to go over to your scratch sheet, you can do that. And let's do some leaves. Point press. So I'm opening that belly and then just bringing it down like that. And go into my olive green over here on the side, tap, tap, tap. Create a long stem. And I'm doing this while it's wet because I want it to bleed. Tap, tap, tap. Just like that. That one you don't even need to. There we go. So we've got another petal coming out of there. Now let's do some really light ones. So I rinsed my brush, just tapped it off, and we're gonna start adding in some more. Press and see how light they are. I'm doing that intentionally. Maybe over here. Let's see, where else could we put one? Maybe here. And we could even go into that blue again. Tap, tap, tap. And I'm just kind of forming out. And look, by the way, how beautiful that blended. That green, when I let it go, it just kind of blended in there. So these are very light value, just like that. And various pressure is going to give me the thicknesses and thinness that I want. Just like that. So that's just kind of a background. Now let's go ahead and let's make our flower here like that one. So I'll go back into that blue. Let me spin that so you can see. Tap, tap, tap. And let's create another flower here. So I start in the middle with my brush sideways, point, press, open that belly. Now I haven't got quite enough liquid on there. Point, press, and we've got our petal here. I could even make it a little bit smaller than that one. Grab my second brush, go into that olivey green, tap it off because I've got an awful lot of liquid on there, and you're already going into wet. So you don't want to have all that too much puddling on there. And then let's pull that down, and this is going to spread out just like that one. And we're going to just bring that down, maybe join it with this stem, just like that. There we go. So now we've got two little flowers here. Let's go in. So I'm keeping my two brushes just so I don't have to keep rinsing and reloading my brush. And I'm going to do one more of those little flowers right there. So pick up, I might even add a little of my Payne's Gray, but I want to keep it with that light value. And I'm going to create another one right here. So, oh, you know what I could do is show you this brush. So very similar. So point, press. See that? It's a very similar look. I really like it. Like that. And then I can go in. Now I've got three brushes going here. There we go. Let's get a little bit of that green, tap, tap, tap. And I'm just going to tap into that. I feel like I want a tiny bit more green in there. And bring that down. And that will, just like these two, look at that. See that beautiful color that washes through? I could even tilt my page, but it will spread on its own just beautifully. There we go. And sometimes I like to add like these little nubs that you see coming out of your flowers. That's just an interesting little touch. You can add those on there. And there we go. Let's do some, so now I am going to rinse my brush. Wash, rinse, scrape off. And let's go in. So I found this new color that was in my palette, and I'm really liking it. I'll have to look it up because I can't remember what I put in here. I'm sure it's one of these deep cherry, almost like a Merlot color. And I'm really enjoying it right now. See how rich and deep that is? Let me show you that on my, well, it's actually this color right here. And I'm liking it a lot. Like, why did I not know about this color before? I just never used it. So I'm adding enough water that it's going to be a light value, maybe a little bit more because that's what I want to start with. And let's see, let's go in and create maybe a little bud here. So point press, just like that. Maybe a little bud over here, and I'm going to start layering. So point press, just a little bud here. And before that dries, I'll go in with my dark green and tap in, hoping to get just a touch of that spread. There we go. Yeah, I like that. And I might even barely touch in with some of that red just here. Yeah, I kind of like that. Just for some interest. And then how about if we do a little one over here? Point press. And maybe over here, maybe coming out of that little stub there. And there we go. And, you know, use a variety of values. And then I'll rinse that out, grab some of that green, tap, tap, tap. And I want to tap into those. And as you can see, I'm painting over the lighter values. Really big tip there. And then I want to add in, since it's fall, some of these fun little berries. So I'm going to take my 8 brush and let's just add in a little berry spray coming out here. So I'll go into my green and let's create a stem. Again, I'm overlapping with a little bit darker value the lighter values there, like that. And maybe some fun little, just something interesting. So don't be afraid to overlap those lighter values. That's what we want to do here. And just keep going. There we go. Yeah, I like that. And then I'll go in, so I'm going to rinse this brush just a little bit and go in with some, let's use some orange. This is kind of an orangey red, but I'm going to lighten the value. You know what, actually, I think I'm going to use gold. So I'm going to use my yellow ochre. Even that color would be pretty. Look at that, isn't that pretty? Tap, tap, tap. And we'll start adding some fun little berries here. I share these berries a lot because I think they're just an easy way to add some variety into your paintings. And then maybe a tiny bit of red, just some dots, something like that. And there we go. Look how fun that is. So I'm going to continue getting a little bit darker, and we need a little spray coming out here. So let's go into our green, and I had a little bit of red. You probably noticed I didn't rinse my brush, but red and green make this dark neutrally color, which I like. Since this is a fall painting, tap, 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 I'm okay with a little bit of that smokiness or even muddiness. So I'm going to create, I've got one here, and I'm going to put one here. Also notice I love working in zigzag. So I started here, went to the left, back up to the right. To me, that's just an interesting way to paint and guide the eyes. So I'm going to add in, here's my stem, and then add in those little colors. If you do have a 2 brush, you could always use a smaller brush. Kind of depends on how big a paper you're using. These little Artisto pads, 140 pound cold press, they are 5.5 by 8.5. So I added a little bit more pigment there. I like that. There we go. And now I'll add in some of those berries. So rinse my brush a bit, go back to that yellow ochre. There we go, add in a little of that in the sienna. Start adding in some berries. And I'm just kind of, I use this term a lot, I don't know how else, I smush my brush. So I'm using the tip, but I'm kind of like smushing a bit to create those little circles like that. And then I'll go in with that little bit of red from my palette that I was using earlier. And just some little buds, little dots. Like that. Isn't that cute and kind of interesting, isn't it? Now I think I'll come out here with some leaves and this type of color. So I'm going to grab my filbert brush again, which has some red in it. So I'm going to wash that, rinse that, tap it off a bit, and go back into those nice, beautiful reddish golds. And we're just going to create some little leaves here. I'm using my brush on its side. Maybe a tiny bit of yellow ochre in there. Like that. I just kind of look where I might want some of that color. There we go. And I'm about done. I'd like to add a little bit more of that blue in a darker color. So let's put some more of that Payne's gray in there. Tap it off. And maybe we could add a bud or two, or we could even go over this. Press. Let's make it even a little bit darker value. Tap, tap, tap. Like that. So we're just adding in a little emphasis there. I don't want to cover these up too much because I really like that blend of the blue and the green. I think that's really pretty. I might do one more bud here in red. That beautiful Merlot color that I'm loving. Let's see, we've got this, so I feel like I need one over here somewhere. Let's see, let me look. Kind of placing it out. I almost feel like I need another little sprig over here. So left, right, another little sprig over here. So maybe I'll just darken this. Just using the side of my brush. Like that. I like that. And then I'm going to add one more little sprig here. Grab that. Get my olive green here. And let's do one more little sprig coming out. I got, just to tell you, I shouldn't have sprayed the center of my palette because it gets really puddly in there. So be careful with that. You don't even really need to spray that. So as you can see here, I'm overlapping the lighter colors underneath and make sure they dry. I could have let that dry just a tiny bit more. Okay. Tap off, get that gold again. Make my little berries. And then a tiny bit of the red. Boop, boop, boop. So fun. And there we go. I think that's kind of nice. We could add in maybe a leaf or two here. You know, just fill in some gaps, or if you're fine with it like that, you can leave it like that. And I think I'm done. So the main focus points are these blue and maybe the red. So just being careful where you place those. I kind of did everything in this zigzaggy pattern. I think I might even do a tiny bit of splatter. Let's grab a light version of that red. Just a tiny bit. And there you go. Rinse off my cat's tongue. There we go. And this, to be honest, would be really pretty with some metallic too. We could have gone in and added some metallics, but I hope you give this a try. It's a little longer video, but I think it's a really fun one. And definitely play with your cat's tongue, with your filberts. They make it almost like cheating to make a flower, quite honestly. I think they're really, really great. All right, everybody, happy painting. I hope you give this a try, and I will see you all soon. I'll be right here reminding you, you are an artist.